Only a few days or so ago, the mood was like Trump and Netanyahu successfully cracked down the regime in Iran with the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In an astonishing display of American and Israeli military might, the regime had been almost entirely decapitated in their opening salvo on Saturday morning, and barely 24 hours later, it looked like Iran might capitulate to Trump's various demands, with Axios reporting that the Iranians were asking to resume negotiations and Trump telling The Atlantic. By Monday, however, the vibes had started to feel quite different. Iran's new interim council signaled that they weren't interested in negotiations, with Iran's foreign minister telling ABC why Iran is apprehensive to open negotiations. At the same time, the war itself showed no signs of slowing down. Iran launched attacks on targets in at least 7 other Arab countries. Fresh fighting broke out between Hezbollah and Israel. At least 3 American troops were killed in Kuwait. At least 3 F-15s were downed. Oil prices spiked and stock markets crashed. The first and most obvious is that Iran's response to Saturday's strike has mostly involved striking targets in nearby Arab countries. For context, before the war actually kicked off, there was a pretty widespread assumption in foreign policy circles that Iran's response would be mostly focused on Israel, as it was during the so-called 12-day war last June. Back then, Iran did fire a handful of ballistic missiles at America's Al Udeid airbase in Qatar, but this was essentially performative, and it quickly became clear that Iran had given not only Qatar, but also the US advanced warning. Iran's reluctance to attack nearby Arab countries last year reflected the fact that, in the past couple of years, Iran's relations with many of its Arab neighbors have warmed remarkably, in large part because at least some Arab countries now see Israel as the main threat to regional security, given its bellicose security posture and the fact that Iran's proxy network had been badly degraded in recent years. There was thus a widespread assumption that Iran would, once again, refrain from striking its Arab neighbors, not least because countries like Saudi Arabia have apparently been privately counseling Trump against a war. But well, this isn't how things have panned out at all, and it actually looks like the bulk of Iran's missiles and drones have gone to targets in nearby Arab countries. This, in part, reflects Iran's military weakness. As the 12-day war demonstrated, Iran loses in a straight-up shooting match against Israel and the US, but it also reflects a wider change in strategy. This time, the Iranians are clearly just trying to cause as much chaos as possible, in the hopes of imposing a myriad of indirect costs on the US. This is a risky strategy. It could provoke Iran's Arab neighbors into joining the war against it, but it could also strain their relations with the US, given this is exactly why they were pleading with Trump not to go into the war in the first place, and because, by attacking a whole load of countries when America's military arsenal and missile defense reserves are already stretched thin, the US will be forced to essentially prioritize certain Middle Eastern allies over others. So that's the first reason that the war doesn't seem likely to end anytime soon. Instead of imposing direct military costs on Israel or the US, Iran's strategy seems to mainly involve regionalizing the war to impose a myriad of indirect costs. The second reason to be pessimistic, however, is that a deal already looks less likely than it did a couple of days ago. Trump seems to have been hoping for one of two things to happen. Either a full-fledged popular uprising and regime change, which is what he called for in his pre-recorded speech released after the first wave of strikes on Saturday morning, or what we might call a Venezuela-style outcome, where the Ayatollah was succeeded by someone more pliant, or a response to US pressure, as happened in Venezuela, when Nicolás Maduro's vice president, Dulce Rodriguez, has proved more willing to cooperate with the US than her predecessor. This is what Trump has been signaling since, telling the New York Times on Sunday that he would be open to working with a more, quote, pragmatic government. He also reiterated his calls for the Iranian people, or specifically the Iranian security services, to take up arms against the regime in another recorded speech posted to the White House channel on Sunday evening.
I once again urge the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranian military, police, to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help. Thank you. God bless you to our incredible warriors, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Unfortunately for Trump, neither of these outcomes, popular regime change or a Venezuela-style outcome, looks likely in the near future. Perhaps it's too early to be pessimistic, but there are no signs of a popular uprising at the moment, and it's worth reminding viewers that last year's protests, which were a real threat to the regime, didn't actually happen during the 12-day war. Rather, they happened months later and arose organically. The first protests were triggered by a depreciation in Iran's currency and organized in bazaars before spilling into wider anti-regime protests. The point we're trying to make here is that it's hard to manufacture protests to meet the moment, as Trump was apparently hoping to happen, especially when you're trying to survive a war. Similarly, the regime has been able to quickly reassemble itself, forming a new interim leadership council comprising President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chief Justice Gholam Hossein Mohseni-Ejei, and Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi, none of whom have signaled an interest in making concessions, Alaa Delcy Rodriguez. Rather, the regime has signaled it will not pursue any further negotiations with the US, presumably both because the US has attacked Iran during previous rounds of negotiations, and the regime knows that, given the iterative nature of this conflict, capitulating now would only invite further pressure down the line. This is perhaps the primary cause for pessimism. If a negotiated settlement is impossible, the war can only end when either the US decides to stop or Iran runs out of weapons.